I'm Ben Carr with Halcyon, and I wanted to welcome everybody to watch a really special interview here. We have Art Coviello, man, myth, legend. That's what you asked for. That's what you get. So
I was joking, but I'll take it. I'll take it.
Well, I think it's justified, right? You kind of are the luminary figure, I think, around RSA. So it's great to really sit down and talk with you.
Well, I appreciate that, but it was our RSA Conference is the work of many, many people, and the founder of it, Jim Bitsos. But anyway, let's get to the heart of the matter.
Yeah. So let's get through some questions. So, Art, let's start off. So, when we look at RSA this year, there's a ton of vendors, and it seems like there's always more and more vendors. So when I walk the floor, I look around and I say, it's just it seems like a lot more of the same. And so when we look at the vendors around, especially when we see the breaches that are still occurring in the industry, are the vendors really bringing out real security products that are causing impact to the industry and causing change? Or is it kind of more of the same? Is there value here? Are investors actually putting the right focus on companies that are emerging startups and developing products that we as CISOs get to actually consume and make change? How do you feel about that?
Well, there's actually lots of things to consider in that question. First and foremost is the environment. People don't realize how much technology has washed over us in the since the new millennium, right?
Sure.
And if you talk about attack surface, it's like an ever-expanding universe. And that has required a significant amount of investment to be able to keep creating more and more granular solutions to address this expanding attack surface. Now, one of the problems you have is when you have as much money going into cyber as has gone into it in the last decade, you're going to have companies that overlap one another. You're going to have difficulty in distinguishing one company from another. And quite frankly, the people that do marketing don't do a good enough job of establishing the value proposition, number one. And they also don't do a good enough job establishing where their product or company fits in a continuum of security and depth. And you, as a past CISO, know that probably better than anyone else.
It's an ecosystem, right? I mean, everything really has to fit together.
Yeah. And it becomes more and more difficult when there's over 6,000 companies competing for airtime and share of mind. And that's what we've undergone. Now, to the second part of the question, are we doing enough in terms of innovation? And I would say there's been tremendous strides. One of the things as a board member I see, and I see from other boards, is the stupidity of the question, why can't you guys stay ahead of the hackers? Well, maybe we could if technology was static. But that exploding attack surface has made it extremely difficult. Now, the only way, and I think we'll probably get to this in other questions, but the only way to stay ahead of it is by producing enough data fast enough and being able to analyze it fast enough to be able to spot the signal in the noise that announces that an attack is underway. That's the only way you're going to get ahead of the hackers.
So that's a great segue into the next question, right? Leading the witness. Thank you. AI, that's kind of the big, I think every RSA, we look for what's the thematic, topic for the conference. And this year, it definitely seems to be AI. We've seen AI be a conversation piece, I think, for many years, but it's really raised in value. And so do you see that AI is going to be necessary when, I as a CISO look to sit down and say, okay, how am I building my program? Like, what parts of it are going to be AI? Is it just the analytics of the data? Is it, replacing human operators? Like, where does that take place? And are companies actually, innovating as quickly as they need to be able to respond to the threat from, I think, AI adversaries, right? Which is where we're going to see, I think, this go.
So somewhere around 95 or 96, Nicholas Negroponte, who ran the MIT Media Labs, said the internet is the most overhyped yet underestimated phenomenon in history. Sounds like a contradiction in terms. In fact, it was overhyped, and our eyes got too big for our stomachs in terms of the investment we made. And you had a whole bunch of silly things that led to the dot-com crash. But fast forward 20 years, and I don't think The understated comment on the back end of that quote was anywhere near strong enough.
Yeah, that's been proven true, right?
Absolutely proven
100%.
true. So I will say here and now, AI today is the most overhyped but underestimated phenomenon in this particular generation. Now, I will give myself credit and my speechwriters credit, because in 2010, when Alan Turing was the theme of the RSA Conference, and it was thinking machines, I talked about the need for machine learning 14 years ago. And what happened over the next decade, from 2010 to 2020, machine learning started to play an increasing role. I can't imagine a security technology investment today that doesn't incorporate some form of machine learning, which often gets confused with artificial intelligence. But to me, it's the precursor. What we're talking about when we talk about AI today is generative AI, AI that learns on its own. And that's an incredible change to the dynamic of what's going to be developed technologically and from a security standpoint. So AI absolutely deserves the attention it is getting. My warning would be, watch out for the overhyped part.
Yeah. And we've talked about that with a couple other people we've had on the podcast, is that like AI is a big space, right? It's not just LLM.
Yeah.
It's not just generative AI, right? These are all pieces of it, but there's a lot to AI, but I agree with you 100%. I think that's right, that really this, machines thinking for themselves and learning, right, is where we're seeing a big push in the industry.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you've seen a lot of companies, you sit on a lot of boards, right? You've got a lot of experience in this area. What are the trends that you're seeing right now in security? I guess both the good and the bad.
So first of all, people underestimate just how slow the move to cloud has been. It's picked up a lot of steam in the last couple of years. But again, cloud was another overhyped. For getting companies to move to the cloud, and even now, people are wedded to on-prem solutions.
Yeah.
But I think an accelerating trend to the cloud is absolutely going on, and the security ramifications of that become even more and more important. And largely, that manifests itself in identity. Identity is huge because it's the start of everything. And today, you can bypass your entire physical infrastructure, go directly from the endpoint to the cloud without touching physical infrastructure. That has changed the dynamic of security and security infrastructures dramatically. The other trend that I think is equally important is the speed with which we're able to detect and respond to attacks, and then remediate. So anything related to detecting, responding, and remediating with greater and greater speed, using a combination of machine learning and artificial intelligence, is going to be critically important going forward.
So one of the things we've seen on the attacker side is really I want to call it the emergence of ransomware, right? I mean, it's been around for a little while, but really we've seen it ramp up in the number and the sophistication of attacks and the volume, right? And so as we look at that, and what are your thoughts on dedicated solutions around ransomware and the requirement for that, right? Because we've seen most companies that actually get hit by a ransomware attack, they have security technologies in place. So how do you see that?
Well, evidently it's not working. But just a quick word about ransomware. It's lucrative. The famous line of Willie Sutton, the bank robber. Why do you rob banks? That's where the money is. Why do attackers increasingly use ransomware? That's where the money is. Ransomware presents itself differently, as we know, than normal viruses. And notwithstanding the tremendous strides that have been made in machine learning algorithms to spot viruses and stop them before they get going, that hasn't necessarily been the case with ransomware. So not only do you need better prevention capabilities, but we also need the ability to recover from ransomware attacks. And that's where I see the need for innovation.
Yeah, and I think, tying into the last question on AI, I think the prevalence of that and what we're seeing is really going to only increase. I mean, AI has really democratized a lot of things, and the ransomware as a service and the ability of actors to kind of consume it in that way has enabled people who really have no technological skills to kind of participate in this. And I agree 100%. It's the monetization. That's what's changed, right? It's about monetization now. It's not just about doing it for malicious nature. And so, unless we get in front of that, it's going to be really hard to stop.
No question.
Yeah. So when you think about everything that's going on with security, when you think about the vendor technologies that are out there, has the role of the CISO changed at all? It seems that, we've seen a lot of things happen recently with regard to CISOs. What's your thoughts on how that role has evolved and where it needs to go?
It's got to be one of the toughest jobs in business, bar none. And there's a reason why they get paid as much as they get paid. And I don't know of a single CISO that doesn't have an ulceral hole in his stomach the size of a cannonball.
It can be painful at times.
Yeah. And again, I think I'm speaking to someone who's been there and done that. I think the role has changed dramatically. First of all, it's been elevated in terms of what is required. CISOs today are genuine business executives. We always talked about the need for the CISO to be as attached to an understanding of the business as possible. That change has happened. If you're a CISO that is not connected with the business, if you're a CISO that doesn't understand the P&L, if you're a CISO doesn't understand the product, technology, goods or services that your company's selling, you won't be a successful CISO.
Foundationally, you have to understand the business, right? I mean, that's really, I think, where we've seen a lot of CISOs who've done really well and been successful. They understand the business.
But goes well beyond that. They have to be almost logisticians now because there's just so many components to creating a security infrastructure that you can't be on top of every single thing. So you have to have your whole security organization structured in a way to address various elements of the threat and the ability to create genuine defense in depth. So it's a massive logistical operation that needs to be created as you're strategic at the same time. So that requires you to have a strong deputy or multiple levels of an organization to assist you and tight management over that. And it also gets to the problem that a lot of vendors realize is they can't necessarily get to the CISO because he or she has delegated the responsibility for the particular solution down and into their organization, which makes it doubly hard on the vendors, especially if you're trying to get noticed. But I always tell our portfolio companies the following three things. You will not be successful unless your solution replaces one of the 150 or 200 vendors that are already existing in a company's environment. But it has to go beyond a linear improvement to what's being done. It has to be an order of magnitude better. Otherwise, why would the CISO or his team switch? The second reason that CISOs buy is because it addresses that expanding attack surface and covers something that hasn't been covered before. Ransomware, by the way, is a good example. If you're covering 90% of ransomware attacks, not bad, but it's the most sophisticated 10% that you really need to be worried about. So you've got to be able to add value to the existing security infrastructure in a way that's not being addressed today. And whether it's OT or IoT or something like ransomware or the migration to the cloud, some security solution that's not being addressed, you have to add that kind of value. So that's number two. Number three, you have to be you have to make the CISO's job more cost effective, which means relieving the pressure on the SOC and making everything else about your security infrastructure that much more cost effective. If you don't have a value proposition that addresses one or more of those, you will not be successful. And as we make investments at Sin Ventures, that's the kind of thing we're looking for.
Art, I think you contextualized the role of the CISO really well there. I'd like to follow up with maybe one more thing, and that's, when you think about your role as a board member, what would your advice be to companies, board members, when they're thinking about, hiring a CISO or the need for a CISO in the organization and the level that it would be? Like, how important is that to hire right?
Well, if you look at most boards today, security is and cyber is among the top risks to a business. What boggles my mind is in an age, in the digital age, when there's not a single business entity, consumer that hasn't been transformed by digital technology, we still have boards of directors that don't have a technologist or two on the board. You wouldn't think of creating a board of directors without a financial expert or two. Why, in this digital age that we have, do we not have more directors with technical knowledge? So that's number one. So if you don't have people with technical knowledge, how can you possibly govern the effectiveness of your security operation and help give guidance around risk to the business? So I also I also advise boards that they need to understand the background of the CISO and where that CISO stands among his or her peers. There's an old expression: if you don't know who the sucker is in the poker game,
It's probably you.
it's probably you. If you don't have the best CISO in the industry, you don't know if you have the best CISO in the industry, or you're unaware of where your CISO stands in the industry, you're the sucker that probably doesn't have the right CISO. By the same token, I tell CISOs, if you don't have an executive leadership team or a board that supports a culture of security, run, don't walk to your next CISO gig, because you'll be in big trouble. And what we've seen with Uber and SolarWinds, it's getting to be a scarier and scarier job, very much unfairly, because, again, no one at the SEC, no one in Congress understands this the way we in the industry do. So it is incumbent on us to lead and make people aware of what the CISO can and can't do.
Art, that's awesome. I really appreciate you taking the time. It's been a great conversation, and hope you enjoyed it as well.
Thanks, I did very much. Thanks, Ben.